So we thought we would start out this session talking about who are we as a learning network, as a membership, who is Cities Reducing Poverty. We had this discussion at the Vancouver Summit, at the Eastern Summit, and I think it was revealing that sometimes we drift away. We don't all remember what the core elements of Cities Reducing Poverty is. So if you're able to see the slides, just a note that we grew this year from 61 cities to 70 cities. And when we count all of the municipalities that those cities and communities represent, we represent 330 municipalities across Canada. And now in the USA, of places that have locally based poverty reduction initiatives. So that's no small feat. We are, quite a big and growing movement now. And some of the key things that Cities Reducing Poverty represents are that, some of these key things that each of our collaboratives have in common is that they are asset based, that we're working from a place of what's working well and what's strong rather than what's wrong. That it's multi-sectoral in nature, and it's not just one sector kind of taking on the issue of poverty again. It's that we understand that poverty is complex, and to meet that complexity, our organizations or our collaboratives need to be complex as well, and that involves everyone around the table. It involves the nonprofit sector, it involves the municipal and public sectors, it involves community groups and residents, and it involves businesses. Um, our collaboratives are reflexive in nature, so we're always learning. We're not just creating strategies, we're reflecting on what we're doing, what our strategies look like. We're learning from one another, and then we're acting on that again. And it's a constant process. Nothing is ever quite static. We're looking at poverty reduction rather than alleviation. We're not trying to increase or create better circumstances for people who are experiencing poverty. We are aiming to reduce poverty as a whole. And then finally, that these plans are comprehensive, that we understand the roots of poverty are so complex. Again, we're meeting them with complexity. It's not just an issue of housing or food security. It's all of these things together. It has to do with awareness building and income security and food security and transportation, et cetera, and that we are tackling these issues together rather than in silos. And what is it that we do and how do we do it? So as the Cities Reducing Poverty membership, we've identified 4 areas of impact that we really feel like we can help each of the local poverty reduction initiatives in. And we have 5 areas of support to do that with. So the 4 areas of impact where we can help you in is moving A to B to C to D. And I think you've heard Paul and some of us talking about this at length, where we have helped to kind of categorize how far people are or how they've progressed along in developing a poverty reduction common agenda or a strategy, because we really have seen that a lot of the times this common agenda, this community-wide plan, is a key piece in a really successful poverty reduction initiative. And so there's kind of that emerging, establishing the energy, growing the leadership roundtable, creating the common agenda, implementing the agenda, and then working into sustainability. And so we're supporting all communities to move A to B to C to D. We're supporting developing the plan specifically, getting to impact and sustainability. And most of you have probably had those conversations recently at length with either Allison or I, your manager of cities. And then the five ways that we're supporting those 4 areas of impact are through these things that you see on the screen. It's through coaching, whether it be expert peer or through managers of cities. It's through communities of practice. It's online, so we have this really large online presence as well, where you are able to engage in learning as you need to through in-person events and publications, because we know that everyone's in a different place. Everybody learns differently as well. So, while one person might want to read a case study, another person might want to come to a webinar or even engage in a discussion one-on-one with an expert coach. So there are many different ways that we offer these 4 areas of impact to help you move A to B to C to D. So we're going to take you briefly through each of those 5 things, because as you're planning for 2019, this might be really helpful to think about how cities reducing poverty, the different learning opportunities, the different connection opportunities can be part of your plan in 2019 to help make your work easier and more effective. So first of all, we have the expert coaching. Several of you have already participated in the expert coaching. We have access now to Paul Bourne, to Liz, and many of the other coaches, or the expert coaches in Tamarack. So these coaches have been on the front lines. They're able to mix theory with practice and do 90-minute calls over Skype over several months for free, so that they're able to coach you and a small group of people through kind of those high level concepts. And it can be things such as developing the community plan, kind of going deeper into that. It could be engaging business at the table. So there are many different things that the coaching could look like. I think we're going to pause too after each of these different resources or learning opportunities, just to see if there are any questions or comments about any of these. If anyone has had great experience that they'd like to share, anything that was particularly helpful, or questions of clarity that you're still unsure about. So just before I move on, are there any questions or comments around expert coaching? I don't think I'm hearing anyone. Allison, why don't I hand it over to you to chat a little bit about peer coaching?
So last year, we focused on developing the expert coaching side of things here at Tamarack. We're really looking to expand peer coaching this year, recognizing peers are really the central, most valuable resource within the network. You all have a lot of experience and expertise, and I think it's really helpful for members to learn from each other who have faced similar challenges in their work. So one of the main ways that we're going to do this is through PIP sessions, the peer input process. Many of you have experienced this either in person at the CRP West or the CRP East event. A couple of you have taken part in them online through the CRP East calls. We did one on the BC Community of Practice. But for those of you who have not, it's a structured approach and method that allows members to share the experience and knowledge within the network with each other. So as part of the process, a member will present a challenge that they're faced with in their work to a small group of their peers who have experience or expertise in that area. So we'll bring together a small group of 8 to 10 peers that have some input that they can share on the question at hand. It's a pretty interesting process. It's been really fun using it at the in-person events as well as online. The member describes their challenge, and that description concludes with a very pointed, specific question that's asked to the group. The group is allowed to engage with the member who asked the question for the first part of the call, so they can ask some clarifying and some probing questions to dig a little bit deeper into the issue. And then the interesting part comes after that, as in person, the member asking the question would turn their chair backwards and would disengage from the conversation. Online, we ask that member to go on mute. And then it's the group itself that deliberates deliberates over the question, brainstorms some ideas, and offers solutions. And it's not until the end where the member who asked the question is brought back into the conversation. So they spend that time listening, processing, taking notes, and at the end they're brought back in to reflect on what they heard. And as well as on their experience with the process itself. So we're looking to bring this process in more frequently next year. We're going to alternate some of our convener calls with PIP sessions, and we're also happy to host pop-up PIP sessions as needed. You know, as challenges arise between the managers of cities, we can work to recruit that small group of experts to help you address any question that you have and any challenge you're facing in your work. I just wanted to ask from members who have experienced the PIP either in person or online, whether you've wanted to share some of your experiences with that or whether you found it helpful as a process.
Carrie Wall here, I can share.
Oh, hey, Carrie, we put you in the hot seat a couple months ago for the PIPs.
Yeah, you did. I think that was just for our BC Community of Practice call, was it not?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, so some people on this call were there on that other call. So, but I wanted to say from my experience of being in the hot seat, I did have some other members of the Cranbrook Poverty Reduction Committee on the phone line. So we were all hearing the feedback and participating. No, I was the one sort of more participating, but we were all there listening. And then following that, we had a wonderful brainstorming meeting and felt like we had been really refreshed and rejuvenated by the very thoughtful comments that came from people. It's a really great format to really feel nothing but, you know, critical thinking in a supportive way. And I say 2 thumbs up.
Thanks, Carrie. And I did find that was great that you were able to bring a few of your colleagues onto the call so that they could be engaged directly instead of you presenting the challenge and then trying to share back what you learned. I thought that was great that you brought together that small group so everyone could participate directly.
Yeah, very helpful. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Gary from Sault Ste. Marie. Did you want me to weigh in on this section, or was it another part that you wanted me in on?
That would be great, Gary.
I was involved in the Eastern Cities Reducing Poverty Conference and participated in a face-to-face group. The session that I was looking for information on, or the subject area, was accessing ongoing funding, given that there's a number of challenges in the area of funding that we all face. One is that a lot of the federal initiatives, the money is not distributed equally per capita from city to city. There's a group of large cities that get the lion's share. And then when you get down a few tiers, which is where Sault Ste. Marie falls in, we basically get the total residual divided by the number of communities that are left, which doesn't work out too much. And then in other areas, such as the Ontario Trillium Foundation, they're willing to put money into startup, into capital, but to get ongoing funding is difficult. So my question was, you know, how do we access this ongoing funding on a regular basis for initiatives under our poverty reduction network? And the initiative that I was referring to specifically is a food resource center that we're running in Sault Ste. Marie that we just started this year. And we received funding from one source for the first year, and that's all the funding that we have. So it was a very good experience to hear everybody's thoughts on it, and I really put the comments into 3 categories. There was some reinforcement of things that we already knew and we were doing for sure. Things like building relationships, growing with networks, getting corporate sector partners, doing a public education of the new initiatives so everybody is aware and gets involved, and bringing in new organizations. Those are things that we knew we had to do and we were working on. They were all reinforced in the group, which was great. There were some things that that were highlighted by the group that we really needed to get moving on. I mentioned that our poverty plan was endorsed by our city council. So the question was, okay, so what else are they doing? You know, what skin have they got in the game? And the answer to that question is none. When we approached the mayor, it was going into the election. He said, I can't make any commitments because I don't know if I'm going to be mayor. But he said, if I am elected mayor again, I will sit down with you afterwards and we'll talk about this. So he did get elected mayor. We're waiting for that conversation to happen. They haven't had their inaugural meeting yet. That's about to happen though. So we're looking for the city to put some money on the table on an ongoing basis to support this initiative. And that was raised by the group at the Tamarack session. The other thing that was raised that was very interesting is that I had never thought of was getting a secondment of city staff to come and help out with the center. And I think that's a really interesting idea, and we are going to look into that. We haven't done anything on that yet, again, because of the election and the timing. And then there was another thing, forming a coalition of partners. I mean, we have a number of partners that meet on a regular basis, but using those partners to staff the center was something that we hadn't considered. So that was another suggestion made that we're definitely going to look into. Very interesting indeed. And then the third category were things that were good ideas, but I just didn't think, and our group doesn't think will work for us. One of them is renting out office space, and that is good in many applications, but because of the size of our center and what we need to do with it, we don't really have any surplus space. So at this point, we don't see that as an option for us, but it's certainly something we would keep in mind moving forward if you know, we were to expand or build additional buildings on the property. And then the one thing that was brought up that again, we recognize we're not interested in looking at it at this point, but there was the statement that, you know, maybe we need to have joint ownership of this building and this project. Right now, it's owned exclusively by United Way that I work for, and we've just started up and we've branded it as a United Way division. And so we're going to move forward with it in that capacity initially and see how things pan out. So that was the suggestion that we'll put on the back burner. But again, certainly appreciate the input from the group. It was a very robust discussion, and certainly appreciated all of the information that was provided.
And I think it's fantastic that, Gary, you're talking about.
Thanks so much, Gary.
You're talking about new ideas that were generated and ideas that kind of reinforced what you were already thinking, and ideas that have just kind of that have raised more discussion within your table. And that was what, all in an hour in person with, I think, 10 people around the table.
Yes.
Great. And I see that Sharon in Lethbridge also wrote in that she was a participant in a PIP session in Vancouver at the Cities Reducing Poverty conference in the face-to-face group. And she wasn't the person asking a question, but as a participant giving feedback, found it a great process as well. And that's something that we've heard from several other people too. So it sounds like there's lots of great momentum around these PIP sessions. So you can definitely expect more in the future as we as managers of cities keep in touch with you, understanding more of the challenges that are coming up. You know, your peers are probably the greatest resource out there. So I'll just finish off with managers of cities, and maybe rather than a really specific coaching resource, Allison and I are the ongoing one-to-one support that's available to you day to day. This position is new this year. We've kind of restructured, and again, we follow A to B to C to D. We want to be there with you to celebrate your successes, highlight your stories to other people, to other conveners, and to that network of 3,500 that's out there. We want to encounter the next challenges with you, and connect you to the right experts or peers, or provide information and resources. And I think, everybody at this point has probably been in touch with either Allison or I as your manager of cities, and are starting those conversations. We're starting to keep track of how things are going, and how we can really be of most use, even if it's just to bounce ideas back and forth really quickly, or to shoot off a quick email, finding new resources. So I thought I would open that up, as we've had contact with lots of you now. Are there any comments or questions on the role of the manager of cities?
Thank you for asking that question. I'm glad you pulled me in on at this piece, because the managers of cities is such a critical role for at least me. For those who don't know, I'm working as a solo out in Chatham, Kent. I report to a leadership committee that is filled with comprised of nonprofit directors and executives and parts of the municipality. But on the daily operations, it's me, myself, and I. So to be able to speak on a regular basis with experts who are working day to day and listening to other communities of practice as well, talk with other communities and what they're doing, to be able to have someone to connect with on a regular basis, to bounce ideas off of, share concerns that our communities are facing and challenges, and how to adapt and model to what we need to do to fix those challenges in our community is quite valuable for someone who's working independently. I think it's also very beneficial that we have managers of cities in regards to moving forward, because if we're going to start actually leading to the reduction of poverty, especially if we're going to come up with a strong plan for reduction of poverty across all of Tamarack, then we have to have managers of cities that are in contact with multiple cities and communities working on this on the ground, to be able to compile these centralized plans and really understand where these connections are. And it helps me, because when I'm faced with challenges, I'm sitting here talking to Natasha on a regular basis as my manager of cities. She can provide valuable insights and connections to other cities and communities who've either dealt with it themselves, have potential solutions, or are facing the same challenges, to go through conversations with them on how they're tackling it, or how we can tackle it as well. So I think manager of cities is a very strong position. And not only that, but it connects us to what Tamarack's up to, which is critical as well. So.
That's great. Thanks, Philip. Are there any other questions about the managers of cities role, or comments from anybody? Okay, I'm going to move it on, and Allison, I'll turn it over to you to talk about the communities of practice.
So communities of practice in 2019 are going to look a little bit different than they did in 2018. We're moving away from the idea of ongoing COPs and working more towards very targeted, short-term action-oriented communities of practice. So you're going to see that from across the communities of practice that we deliver for next year, starting with the convener calls. So we're going to continue to host CRP West and CRP East calls, but those are going to move to a quarterly basis. And we're going to complement those calls with private webinars. So these will often be delivered by peers within the Cities Reducing Poverty Network. They'll be open to yourselves and your colleagues, and we're going to make sure that that content is really responsive to needs of members. So as a learning need arises, we can try to bring someone in to speak to the topic that you're looking for. So hopefully very responsive and timely in terms of what kind of learning you're seeking within your initiative. And I spoke in some detail previously about the PIP sessions, but those PIP sessions will also be integrated into the convener call schedule, and we're happy to host pop-up PIP sessions as needed as questions come up from within the network. As far as the series-based COPs, so we're going to, we've actually launched our first couple of series-based COPs. Natasha's hosted the first Urban Indigenous call. We're also working with Paul on the Developing a Community Plan Community of Practice. This one is a 3-part series that's taking new and emerging members who are interested in taking those first steps towards developing a community plan and taking them through a process and some ideas on how they could get started with that. In the new year, one COP we're really looking forward to hosting is Getting to Impact, and so that was introduced to you at the CRP West and East events, where we're going to get some training from Mark Cabage. Really fortunate to be working with Mark Cabage on this one, so there's going to be a series of modules, and at the end, members will be developing their own impact reports. So it's with the goal of making reporting on impact from members and across the network easier and more uniform. Beyond these series-based COPs, we're also going to keep some of the ongoing communities of practice. Living Wage will be one of them. The BC Community of Practice will continue, as well the municipal and provincial governments. So that's a bit of an overview of communities of practice. I know Jill's on the line with us, and Jill's been, Jill from the beginning has been really heavily involved with the BC Community of Practice. We worked on developing it together, and she's been co-chairing from the beginning. So I just wanted to invite Jill to say a couple words on why you think the COPs, the value of COPs to the network, just from the perspective of the BC Community of Practice, and I know you've been involved with others as well.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Allison. Yeah, I have been connecting to the network via communities of practice since I started doing this work in about 2011. And I think what really drove me to seek out the Cities Reducing Poverty Initiative is that, you know, Revelstoke is a really small, isolated rural community in BC. And so, you know, I think that, you know, to kind of decrease that sense of isolation, the communities of practice have been pivotal. So, and being connected to the Cities Reducing Poverty Network really has made a significant impact on the nature of poverty reduction work in our community, particularly in our approach. I think as community developers, we are all knowledge seekers. You can spend hours scouring the web for information and resources, but sometimes it can be challenging to find information sources that are valid or from, you know, a source that you trust. So for me, more than anything, I think that the COPs really have provided an excellent shortcut to accessing relevant information and increasing access to a vast array of resources to support community-based work. And importantly, particular to the Canadian context. So this leads to an increased ability to target our work and ensure that it is based on best practices. And positive examples from other communities just really strengthen and support everything we do moving forward. We all know that poverty reduction is really tough work. We always talk about it's complex and that we're in this for the long term. But when you're part of a national community, the task is not so daunting as it could be. It's so important, as we've already discussed on this call, that this work is not done in isolation. And particularly in BC, over the last couple of years, we've seen an increased number of communities making poverty reduction work a top priority. So with the BC Community Practice and the new Western Cities Initiative, it's been so great to see Tamarack and the Cities Reducing Poverty movement become less Eastern Canadian centric, as can, you know, is natural when things foment and are kind of born in Eastern Canada. You know, I think we've managed to kind of pull it outwork and build, pull it out west and build the work out west, which has been really exciting. But when we started the BC Community of Practice, we wanted to create a neutral venue where everybody, including all levels of government and community representatives, could share their experience, knowledge, resources, inspiration that would really help guide the work at a local level from the ground, from that ground up community development perspective. So we've had calls, everything from financial literacy to, we had a great call with looking at the patient medical home model and how that can be used to reduce poverty. That came from Nelson. We've talked about development of poverty reduction strategies around the province, early childhood development. We just really wanted to provide members with like an opportunity to share resources, best practices, and lessons learned. We all don't need to reinvent the wheel. So it's so great to hear what's working in a variety of communities across the province, particularly to the BC context, which is so important. I think the COPs are just an excellent venue to cultivate the conditions for proactive conversations, but also opportunities to cultivate connections between members. So you can follow up on something, you can dig a little deeper, you can get more information, you can build relationships on a regional, provincial, and national level that at the end of the day strengthen what we're all doing in our own communities.
Oh, thanks so much, Jill. That was a great overview. Yeah, it's always been, a pleasure working with you on the BC Community of Practice, and then looking forward to continuing that for next year as well. And I think Natasha's going to take us next through online learning.
Great. So a lot of you have probably been a part of or seen some of these items kind of in different ways. So on the screen, I have kind of an overview of what the online learning looks like, because we make the learning available so that you can access it as you need it, when you need it. So for instance, we do blogs. We do blogs all of the time. And a lot of these blogs are really new ideas that are coming from your experience in your poverty reduction initiatives as you go. And again, nobody is saying that everybody on this call is an expert, but I think as Jill was saying, it's great to know what's going on in different areas. So we put these blogs out there. There are so many people that are listening and watching what Cities Reducing Poverty is doing, what you guys are learning, and then contributing back on their own as well. So if you take a look at that blog spot, those are really the new ideas that are coming to light by going through some of these processes. And they are found on the website. So the website, this year we moved our Vibrant Communities website over to the Tamarack website. So now you can find everything in one place. And this really brings together everything that we're generating in our 5 idea areas, but also everything that we're learning kind of from the ground up. Like as we're going, we're learning, right? And we're generating all of these resources. So you will find case studies and tools and resources and webinar recordings and the blogs and so much more on the website. You can send people there to learn more about Cities Reducing Poverty, Cities Deepening Community, and on our page find, those really top important resources that will help you with a poverty reduction community. So we do encourage you to visit that website every now and then and just kind of see what's new and what's going on. Webinars. We host webinars almost monthly. They are these big idea areas that you can explore. They are, often over the lunch hour, or if you're on the West Coast, just waking up, look at ideas, processes, issues, some of the most recent ones we held this year was how the 211 system can be helpful to poverty reduction initiatives. And they were talking all about the data that they're collecting and how that could be used for poverty collaboratives. We looked at the introduction to reconciliation and how individuals can walk on their own journey, as we're asking organizations and collaboratives to do that as well. And there are so many more. So attend the webinars, bring your colleagues. Again, it's great kind of fodder for discussion as you're working on some of these issues as well. We have a newsletter that should go to everybody here, and this is your way to connect with each other. This is kind of like if you think about a family newsletter, we put all of those updates in there, all the little successes, all of the upcoming events. This is kind of like the curated website in your inbox every month. And then if you do have those stories to share with other people, if you want to highlight some of the work that you're doing, you're saying we have a great idea, you can put it into the newsletter, and then it goes not only to other CRP members, but also to 3,500 learners across Canada and abroad. So if you do want to contribute, we always put the call out there. Contribution should come in the first week of every other month, and coming up January will be the next edition of the newsletter. So if you're thinking right now of anything that you have percolating that you wanted to get into the newsletter and around to the network, you can just send a quick email to either Allison or I, or managers of cities, and we can make sure that we're sharing that news as well. And then finally, the online learning community consists of social media, because it's such a big part of forming a learning community now, is raising awareness, taking this discussion public, so that we're not just talking between each other, but we're on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, and we're talking more broadly. We're bringing in other voices, and we're really generating that movement. So if you want to get involved in this way, you can be following, you can be tweeting and sharing and liking, and really amplifying that movement if you have your own organization or collaborative social media accounts. And then we get to our in-person events, and I know there's always a lot of excitement around these ones. So just to share back some information about the last summits that just happened. This past year in 2018, we did it a little bit differently. We did our first large national poverty reduction summit in 2015, and we've been doing them annually nationally for a few years. But this past year, we split it into two regional events in the East and in the West to help bring it a little bit closer to home, so you're not flying potentially as far across the country to meet up with everyone. And we did bring 378 people attended one of those summits in total. So that did increase the number of people who were able to attend, that you were able to learn from, to interact with. And 93% of our members showed up. So out of those 60 to 70 Cities Reducing Poverty members, we had almost nearly everybody represented at one of those two summits. So we did one in Peel, one in Vancouver. And I think between the both of them, Allison and I were at both, including engaging people with lived and living experience, were definitely central to both of those conversations. Allison, did you want to share any of your own highlights from the Western event?
Sure, and a couple of these overlap with the East as well. So we had a welcome video we were able to show from Minister Duclos. In the West, we had an opening from Honourable Shane Simpson. We had a couple of amazing lived experience workshops led by Saskatoon. Saskatoon organized for us, two revolving around engaging folks with lived experience in the work. We had some social innovation tours in Vancouver's downtown east side. And I would really say that one of my highlights was the member gathering, where we brought together just members and we did the learning carousel, the PIP sessions, and just some general mingling and networking, which I think was really great to have that face-to-face time with everybody.
And I'd reiterate, some of those great sessions. We also did in the East, and in addition, we focused on some of those social innovation areas, and we had one specifically where we were looking at rural social innovations, and one specifically where we were looking at social innovations in an urban center. And some of those conversations were really interesting. We also, Peel, who hosted us, the Peel Poverty Reduction Committee, launched their 10-year plan, and which is, the first of its kind to have a 10-year strategy. It was, they had an initial kind of, I think it was a 3-year strategy, learned from it, and then built on it. They had just gone to council and gotten it approved, and we all celebrated with a really large reception as they did their official launch of that strategy. So we got to hear all about it, and the Peel region and the Peel Poverty Reduction Committee were really very intricately involved in all of the moving parts of the summit, really involved with bringing people into the agenda, with bringing lots of people who have lived or living experience of poverty into the room to hear from their voices as well. So that was really great. Is there anybody on the line too? I know that a lot of you have joined us in either Peel or Vancouver. Is there anybody who'd like to add their own reflections, anything they took away or found really exciting?
It's Gary from Sault Ste. Marie. I attended the Mississauga or the Peel sessions, and one of the things I found really interesting was the tours, and especially the kitchen where they were training newcomers in how to work in a kitchen, and they ended up with certificates so that they could actually work in the food service industry. And that's something that I would like to implement in Sault Ste. Marie as well. I think it was a great program, and great exposure to different innovative ideas like that.
Sometimes it's great to get outside of the workshop room and really into the communities to see some of these ideas being implemented. And I believe Paul is on the line now as well. Paul?
I am, yeah. Good to be on the call. Sorry I was a bit late, but I've been listening in to most of the call. You guys are doing a great job.
No worries. Did you want to add anything about some of your highlights from either of the summits?
Well, I think what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about next year's summit. Let's hear from more people about this year's summits.
This is Jill here again from Revelstoke. For me, it was just so cool to actually meet people face to face that I'd had conversations with over the years. And it was also a really good opportunity. We had a little breakfast meeting one morning with our regional group. So it was a chance, to kind of piggyback, off the Vancouver summit and actually engage people in our region face to face.
It's Morag. I would echo Jill's comments. For me, it was really great to meet people from across the region and across the western part of the country, but also particularly from the region, working on poverty-related issues. It was fantastic to get their input and to hear what they were doing and how we could maybe leverage bits of each other's work in our own areas. I really appreciated that. And the other thing I really enjoyed was there was a session with Darcy Dobell, and having the perspective of someone who's not working directly on poverty-related issues was also really good, just in terms of building various different campaign strategies, leveraging successes that have happened in other areas, and being a little bit more integrated in our approach. And I think that that's an incredibly useful thing to do. There are really great campaigns and really great strategies that are employed by people working in different areas right the way across the country and around the world. And it's just really good to be able to sort of listen to how people did things and then maybe take things, take different strategies away and see if you can actually apply them to your own work. So I thought that was really good too.
That's great. Thank you. Is there anybody else? Anything that excited you?
Sounds like people are excited to hear about next year.
Paul, it's on over to you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I joined a little bit late. I was with a reporter that was coming to do a story on the Institute, and we ran out of time. It's great to hear from all of you, and it's also great just to give you a stronger overview of the supports that we have and how we're working these days. So we're still brainstorming about next year, and there are two kind of competing forces. One is, do we have another summit? Do we have a big national one where we all come together in one place? Do we have the two again? But we've been toying with another idea, and that is that we just bring conveners together, 2 people from every city, and that would be about 150 people that would come together, and all of us would be working to develop our poverty reduction work in our communities. And we would just be talking with one another and hearing presentations that would help us advance our work. And it would be very specific to the conveners and members of leadership roundtables. So this is what we're thinking. And then in 2020, having a really big summit where we might even organize it with some other large national players that are looking at poverty reduction, and it would be much more traditional, but it would probably be around 400 people or more in 2020. But we're thinking of this coming year. We're wanting to sort of poll you and talk with you about the possibility of bringing together our members and getting really intensely focused on our work, on the movement as a whole, on the skills that you're asking for, and to make it much more specific to your learning and needs. And so our goal in the next month is to really ask this question of you, to see what it is that you might want to learn, what your thoughts are about coming together as a whole group. And we've never done that before, and we're so large now that it would still make for quite a big gathering. So those are the early thoughts on this coming year, and just wondering if we have any immediate responses to that from the group. Or any questions?
Gary from Sault Ste. Marie, I like that idea, Paul. I certainly would support that and make every effort to be present.
And this is Jill here again, Paul. I think that, I think that getting specific would be great. Like I think of the game changers, right? It's like really identifying the game changers that where different communities are able to really move the needle. I think that one of the things is that we're in a different climate, both federally and in British Columbia, anyhow, provincially. And so it's like how to capitalize on that change of climate, really, again, at the community level.
Excellent. Both. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Jill.
No, sorry, Paul. Hi, sorry. This is Ivan from Vibrant Communities Calgary. Hi, everybody. Paul, either way, a large summit or more focus on the conveners too per city would work depending on what is your work plan. I personally will favor hands-on working sessions, and the pet peeve that I have right now is with how we capitalize on opportunity for all, the federal poverty reduction strategy. What is the role that vibrant communities can play around that, specifically around measuring the right things around poverty and establishing MBM and all its affiliates that have been promised as the right things to measure to do the right things around poverty in our cities. Thank you.
Thanks for that very much. I know it's 3 o'clock, so I'll pass it back to you, Natasha, to wrap up, or Allison.
All right. The last thing that we were just going to mention as one of the 5 supports was publication. So 10 of you now have worked with us on co-authoring some of these case studies to tell a more in-depth story of a really specific topic, such as, what does collective impact look like? How do you build it into a poverty reduction initiative? Some of those 5 idea areas like collective impact, community engagement, some process areas like developing a community plan or building a poverty reduction roundtable, some approach areas like how to implement ABCD or leverage a sustainability plan for your poverty reduction roundtable. And then some of the game changer ideas focusing more on topics like housing policies and financial empowerment and how that plays into a comprehensive poverty reduction strategy. So, and I know Paul is really excited about these, but we are as well to work with more of you over the coming year to focus in on some of those really exciting ideas and take it further. These case studies, they're 5 to 7 pages. They really help, again, people in the future accessing them when they need that kind of learning, when they get there in their strategy. We're able to provide these even as kind of a coaching tool to help them along. So if anybody is interested in co-authoring any of these case studies, we're planning to do more next year, and it'll help to tell your story as well. So be in touch with Allison and I, and we can absolutely work on one of those together. And then finally, just to wrap up, we hope that from this conversation today, you'll walk away with some clarity around what the membership learning opportunities look like, what they're going to look like in 2019, what's exciting for you, and how you can work with your roundtable members to make your work easier and more effective in 2019. If you have any questions, if you want to dive a little bit deeper on any of those 4 areas of impact, or the 5 ways that we put that impact into kind of like a community of practice or coaching or blogs or that kind of thing, just be in touch with Allison and I. We can absolutely work with you on that. So we would recommend going back to your roundtable and just take this information. We'll send you the PowerPoint and the recording, and think about with your other members how you can really use the membership and the different learning opportunities next year. We look forward to hearing from you. So as it's just past 3 o'clock, I will say thank you very much to everybody for being on the call, for participating today, and we will be in touch in the new year. So happy holidays and have a great afternoon.